My name is Marcia Robinson, and we are recording an oral history with Mark Plegeman, Kathy Bishop-Clark, and Rob Speckert. This interview is part of the Sweet MUMories Oral History Project to mark the 50th anniversary of the Miami University Middletown, Ohio campus. This interview is taking place on February 7th, 2017 at Johnston Hall. Professors, do I have your consent to proceed with this interview?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So we'd like to hear your stories about how this campus started, and would someone like to speak about that, from about the early years of being a faculty member?
Well, in the 1960s, the state of Ohio was in the process of building two-year college campuses. Prior to this, they had what they call extension, where they would teach university classes in the high schools. But then, and I don't know if we were the first at Middletown, but in '66, that was the beginning. And every 2 to 3 years, another campus was opening. And it was a tremendous job market for teachers because there were just an abundance of jobs to be had. And people would come and teach a couple of years and move on to another place. But the thing that I remember most, in August of 1966, the Board of Trustees and President Schreiber stood on the balcony of Johnson Hall and predicted that this would be a 4-year campus in a very short time. Well, the irony is that it took 50 years to do this because now we give baccalaureate degrees. So eventually they achieved their goal, okay? But everything has changed, for the way it was. The entire campus was in one building. We had a library, we had Verity Lodge, and we had Johnson Hall. All the academic disciplines, all the administration was in one building, okay? And that led to a great deal of cohesion with the faculty, because when we came in '66, there were about 30 of us full-time. We didn't know each other, and so we were in very close quarters and got to know each other and had tremendous amount of interaction socially together. It was a cohesive faculty. Once they built a second building, Theskin Hall, the sciences, engineering, technology, nursing, business tech, all other subjects were in that building, and science and mathematics. So you had a split, and a lot of the faculty didn't interact as well together as they did when we had one university building. Okay, so there was an unintended consequence, but it was necessary. Okay.
Do you want to tell us about some members of the first 30?
Well, one of the interesting things is 6 of the original faculty members were World War II veterans. So I thought it was quite unusual that we'd have that many at the time.
Which ones?
Well, we had Joe Eyre, we had Gene Bennett, who was director, we had Joe Baxter, who taught history, Bob Kelwick, who was an expert on the German and the Nazis, and he's written several books about them. Malcolm Subdan was a World War II pilot, taught poetry and creative writing, and Ray Fenning was a Marine Corps colonel who taught political science. So those.
Did they sit around and talk about the war?
Not so much. That generation didn't like to talk about the war. Okay, very, very seldom did they ever, unless you asked them specifically a question. They weren't very open about it.
Were there any women among the first 30?
Oh yes, oh yes. I don't know what the proportion was, but it was pretty evenly divided, I think, between that. But the faculty expanded enormously in the first 2 years. It practically doubled in size. We went from 5 English teachers to 10. And so in many of the academic divisions, the faculty grew because the students grew in those first 4 or 5 years.
Let's talk about early memories for others about the faculty. Where would you like to begin?
Sure, I'll share. I came to Miami in 1985. I came here as a department chair of engineering technology, and I was sharing with you that when I came here, I had an office on all 3 of Miami's campuses. So I never did get to know anybody too well at any one campus because I was always on the road, but I had 3 offices and 3 supervisors, if you will, 3 different deans. But it worked out. I would spend 2 days a week in Middletown and 2 days a week in Hamilton and 2 days a week in Oxford. And I think that for our department, that worked well because it kept us connected as far as a department and as far as all the things that were going on in the university on all 3 campuses. But when I first came here, we had a very small faculty. I think there were 4 faculty and myself. We had 2 associate degrees, and they were very low enrolled. In fact, to be honest with you, I was sharing with some colleagues. I was a little bit shocked, actually, when I got here of just how low enrolled some of the programs were. And after I thought about it, it sort of made sense. I mean, a technology program at Miami University was not something that was well thought of at the time. In fact, Miami was known for business and liberal arts, and engineering technology just wasn't too much to be had. As a matter of fact, I can remember in my school, which was then the School of Applied Science, we had there was a brochure in the admission office that started off with, "Miami does not offer traditional engineering programs." I mean, who would ever label a brochure with that title? That was the title of the brochure. It was absolutely crazy. But fortunately, when in my department in particular, just to share information about what happened, here on the regionals, we survived the time of low enrollment, got to better enrollments by the late 1980s, and by the beginning of the 1990s, we're realizing that for us to be competitive, we needed to have a bachelor's degree program and not just associate degrees. And I convinced my deans that, look, and I had come from a 2-year college, I said, 2-year colleges are nimble. They can change programs, implement programs, and within a few months have a new program up and running. Here it's going to take us 1.5 years to get a new program up and running. And so we did the surveys and found out that, in fact, there was a strong demand for people to complete bachelor's degrees in engineering technology. And we wrote and received approval to offer a bachelor's completion degree through the regional campuses of Miami. And that approval occurred through the Ohio Board of Regents in 1995, December of 1995. And that was unprecedented. In fact, it was unprecedented in Miami to be fully delivering a bachelor's through the regionals, even though the nursing at the time was delivering portions of it. And it was not traditional that the Board of Regents would support that. So it's kind of interesting to talk about where we are today. We're essentially now a 4-year university, but back in those days, that was not the case. In fact, I can remember our approval was time and place specific for the regional campuses, but permanently approved to be delivered through the Oxford campus. So we had a 2-year window that we were approved for this bachelor's completion degree. And I can remember at the end of 2 years, I called the assistant dean in the school and I said, "Wow, what do we do now? We're at the end of the 2 years. We've got good enrollment. The enrollments took off immediately." And she said, "Well, just write a letter to the Board of Regents and say, hey, the program's going well. We want indefinite continuation." Never heard back from them. So here we are today. So one of the things we did is back in that time frame, we also started delivering that program. I'd written letters to all the chairs and deans of technology programs in Ohio and said, "Hey, we want to articulate with you and offer a bachelor's completion degree on our site." Well, a couple of those community colleges approached me and said, "How about delivering it on our site?" So we actually started about approximately 1 year after we got the program approved, delivering our courses at Columbus State Community College. I hired faculty, PhDs in mechanical engineering and so on, in Columbus to teach Miami courses at Columbus State in engineering technology. And so I'd go 2-3 times a semester to review their classes, make sure things were going well and so on, and of course recruit students and stuff while we were there. And that program took off. A couple years later, we've got, in fact, with help from Rod Nimps, we've got an Ohio Learning Network grant, which enabled us to formalize that program and deliver it then permanently or systematically to 5 college partners, Columbus State being one of the 5. And eventually that program just took off. It's now, we fast forward to where we are today, we have 11 college partners across the state of Ohio. We have graduates from all of those that have come through those programs. And we've got literally hundreds of students in those degree programs. And this is an ABET accredited program that we deliver to communities where those students would not otherwise have the opportunity to get a bachelor's degree in close proximity to their home. And so we serve rural areas and suburban areas, and it's just been a really, really win-win situation. It also, enables us to pave the way for distance learning technology. Again, we were delivering courses, some on-site. Again, like I said, I hired faculty in Columbus, but then once we got the OLN grant, we used interactive video technology, two-way audio video technology to deliver courses. And we challenged that technology in 1996, 97. That technology was not nearly as robust as it is today. And boy, were those headaches back in those days. But again, today it's very reliable. We still use interactive video technology, but I can remember working closely over the years with Janet Hearn and others on innovations of delivering courses and programs by distance and so on. And of course, today she's leading our work in e-learning and online classes and things like that. And it makes me happy to see sort of where we've come. Back in the day when we were doing it, we were sort of the only game in town. And now to see everybody, so many programs doing things like that, I think there's considerable value to Ohioans through that.
I'd like to keep talking about the technology portion and talk about the fields. But before we talk about what developed, there's a community demand for technology from some of the businesses in the area. Would anyone like to speak to some of the corporations that we've worked with to develop programs and develop students for their workforce?
Do you want to? I can share with us. Obviously, we're very well connected with local business and industry. We have a robust co-op program that our students can participate in. We work regularly. In fact, Procter & Gamble's visiting campus. They're visiting, the Hamilton campus Monday. And we've got about 30 students. We'll be visiting with them with looking at opportunities for co-op and full-time placement. Obviously, Armco, AK Steel, General Electric, those are bigger companies and bigger names that but many, many small companies, 50 to 100 employees, hire our graduates and co-ops. We also have a very robust senior design program in which graduating engineers they're in their last program of an ABET accredited bachelor's degree program in engineering technology, team up in teams of usually 3 students per team, and they take on a significant design project, usually sponsored by a business or an industry or a nonprofit organization. And it's a year-long course. It's our only year-long hyphenated course, but that connects us very, very closely with those companies. We have repeat, force control and, advanced drainage systems. And there's just so many companies that sponsor senior design projects and hire co-ops and graduates. And it's just kind of a nice partnership. I think it's win-win again, helping those companies get the necessary employees, giving good employment to our students. They have the opportunity to graduate with a high demand degree and virtually no debt, because they can co-op and work along the way, and that's a nice advantage for them.
Another technology field that developed is in information technology. Mm-hmm. And I understand, Kathy, you have 15 years experience or more in that.
28. 28 years.
28,
but I've been out of it the last 10.
Could you speak to us about the evolution of the information technology?
Sure. And I also want to start with walking in the door in 1989, which is when I walked in the door. I can remember, and we were trying to figure out the name. We're pretty sure we figured it out, to Dorothy Caudell. I was 25 years old. I'm interviewing for my first job after a master's degree, and the master's degree wasn't even complete. I was interviewing in something like April, and I was to get my degree in August. So I really have no clue what I'm even doing, right? I don't even know what I'm doing. And I remember walking through the door of Johnston Hall and seeing Dorothy Caudell, and she just smiled. This welcoming smile that said, and she must have said, "Welcome to Miami Middletown. Can I help you?" And I remember thinking, thank God, somebody's nice. And that was my first impression of Miami Middletown. And it was of warmth and kindness and, can I help you? And so I think that has been pervasive theme through Miami Middletown and Hamilton through all the years. But then I remember I want to throw out Diane Delicio's name, who was at that time a coordinator, and she was the one that interviewed me. And I remember Dorothy called her, Diane, Kathy Bishop is here. And so Diane came over to get me, and we walked over to Theskin Hall, and it was the last day of finals week. The last day of finals week, everybody's exhausted. Nobody can even come up with coherent sentences. And I remember her interviewing me thinking, man, this woman doesn't have it together, but she was exhausted. It was the last day. And I tell Diane DeLucio this too, by the way. This isn't anything I'm just telling you secretly. It's a story that we share often. And we had the interview, and I met other people in the department. And in the end, I ended up being offered 2 jobs, one here at Middletown and one in Oxford. And I debated and debated, wondering if I could work with Diane DeLucio, because our personalities were so different. But we've come to be very good friends, and I want to make sure her name is in the record, because she led the first CIT department, and she led it for a period of at least 15, maybe even 20 years. And the group of people that I started with in 1989, it was Diane DeLucio, she was our coordinator and then chair, and then it was Laurie Warner, Paul Cantonwine, and Ron Harkins. They were all there. And then Liz Howard joined maybe 5 years after I did. That group was together from 1989 until maybe 5 years ago. They started retiring. So it was first Ron Harkins retired, and then Paul, and then Laurie, and Diane has a job now as an associate dean in Oxford. But that's a long, long time for a group of people to be together, and for there not to be changes. It was us. We were the CIT department. So it's fun to think back at those times. And when I started, I taught computing technology. I was in a room with no computers, right? It's just a room of a regular old classroom where I teach about a word processor, right? And I teach about the spreadsheets, and then on occasion, maybe every 2 weeks, we get to go into the lab and actually practice using the word processor and the spreadsheet. The computer lab, which is where I spent a lot more time of my time. When I started, it was run by Kathy Hanshaw, and then Nancy Tebow took over. Nancy was there during a transition time. She was the one that moved the computer center from a little tiny area into what it is today, which is a pretty big area that's got all kinds of technology. To lead back, and then Terry Newton was also a big contributor for many, many years in the computer center. But eventually, we moved from mainframes to PCs, and then the PCs, of course, get smaller and smaller and smaller, and now it's PCs to almost, cell phones, right?
So, can you tell us some stories about your colleagues? What did you do for fun when you're not grading and giving headaches to students?
Well, let me name a few things, okay? We had a lot of social activities for the faculty. We had casino nights where we rented all the casino equipment and had a gambling night. We'd had several of those. We had field trips to Chicago, New York, and I took students to France and Quebec during spring break, students from Miami. We had a baseball team, a faculty baseball team. We had a faculty garden up on the hillside from the parking lot on that side of Johnson. We had a faculty garden up there that we all participated in. I was trying to think of some other things we had. Just a lot of field trips planned during spring break to places like France and New York, Chicago, Quebec, and I led many of those different ones. And so we had a lot of occasions where we got together socially. And that stopped once Theskin Hall. It really kind of broke up because you had science and technology over there, you had liberal arts over here, and the two don't always meet.
Right.
But I want to stress one other thing about Miami that was unique. We came in '66. In 1971 was the 5th year. A decision had to be made on the faculty where they're going to be given tenure and retained. Well, Miami has always emphasized the quality of undergraduate education. If you read the ratings in U.S. News and World Report, Miami gets top ratings for that. So they put a big emphasis, especially on the regional campuses, on the quality of teaching. Well, they had 7 of us. In 1971, they said, what are we going to do with them? They haven't finished their PhD. They got their bachelor's and master's degree. What are we going to do? Well, the senior faculty said, well, we can't make them assistant professors because they don't have their PhD. We're going to create a whole new rank, and I've never heard of this anywhere. They created a senior instructor tenured professor, okay? Senior instructor tenured professor with no limits to salary, okay? They could make as much as a full professor. And the reason behind this, they had 7 really great teachers, and they didn't want to lose them. So they created a new academic rank so they wouldn't have to let them go. And I think that's really speaks well for Miami on their emphasis of quality undergraduate education.
Well, that's interesting. More parties, though. I heard there were lots of dinners and more parties. What else did faculty do?
I think I wasn't invited to these
Yeah, I was
things.
going to say.
Mark's talking about going to Paris.
Yeah, like, what's going on here?
Did you go to any
I
parties?
missed out on those.
Oh, wait, there was a picnic
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
at
yeah.
the tennis courts. I heard about
Absolutely.
that.
That's right.
Yeah, those
So
are
what
good.
happened there?
I do remember the faculty softball team. I totally forgot about that.
What?
But I remember faculty softball team.
Yeah, and poker games among the
I
men.
don't remember any of that. But yeah, there used to be a big picnic down by the tennis courts. And that was in the earlier years. Like, were you invited to those?
I did, I was.
Yeah. But what I remember most about those is they had big mounds of sand with coins in them. And so all the kids would run and
Oh, that's
look for coins. And I remember watching it, and then I had my own kids, and then my own kids were in there looking for coins. But those were always really nice picnics. They were a lot of fun.
Well, I think the book Hillbilly Elegy has brought back so many memories of teaching first-generation college students back in the late 60s who had a really rough time of going to school. They had kids, they had jobs, they had to go to school, they had to get daycare for their children. It was really difficult. And when you found out their stories, they were just amazingly courageous people. And I think everybody should read that book, and you really feel like what Miami was like with Armco Steel hiring so many people from Appalachia and then their children coming here to Miami.
Would you mind telling us some stories about those students without giving any names?
They were some of the brightest students I ever taught were in the first 5 years. Now, most of these people were not in associate degree. They were going for a 4-year degree, and they had to have a minimum academic grade to be able to transfer to Oxford. So they were really intense about what they were doing, and they knew they were on a 4-year track. They weren't on a 2-year track. And we didn't have a lot of competition, because Hamilton opened 2 years later. There was Sinclair College in Dayton, but other than that, we had a great market for these students. But they were first-generation students for the most part.
Okay. I would like to get some more stories about some of the administrators as persons. We have records in their newspaper articles about what event they attended, but if you have any stories about them as persons or colleagues, can you think of any?
I'll start. When I came, Rob Speckert was the department chair. And I have told Rob this before. He is somebody I consider, even though I never came to him and asked for advice, one of my best mentors by observation. Because I watched him over the years, and I'm an observer. I watch how people react and how people handle things. And Rob took that department from just associate's degree to bachelor's granting degree. He did it with some challenging and strong-willed faculty members, and he did it with grace. And so Rob knows this, but he is one of the people that I have always held in very, very high regard.
I really appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
I only did it because it was on tape.
I know you
Yeah,
did.
He's going to pay me in a little bit later.
I got you covered later.
$20 is coming later.
You know, it's funny that you say that, but I got to tell you that, you know, when I came here in 1985, and thinking of computers reminded me of something. I negotiated with Gene Bennett and Harriet Taylor at the time, both of whom were the regional campus deans, that if I came here, that I could hold an auction on the unused equipment that was in our labs. And I would be able to take that equipment and buy personal computers so we could start running computer-aided drafting courses. Because I had come from a college where we had already been doing that for 4 or 5 years. In fact, we bought IBM PCs directly from IBM at the previous school I had been at, and that was like in 1981 or 82. And they agreed to it. In fact, everybody, when they heard I was doing it, said, oh, they're not going to let you keep the money and so on. But they agreed to it, and it actually helped kickstart our program. But I remember the challenges back then, because even though we had some PC labs where we would run CAD, computer-aided drafting, they were small and secluded, you know, and wasn't as populated as it was today. But as an administrator, we weren't at the point where we were using computers as tools. So again, my assignment was all 3 campuses of Miami: Hamilton, Middletown, and Oxford. So traveling between campuses, it was difficult to know, how do you manage, what do I take with me when I leave Middletown office, because tomorrow I'm going to be in Hamilton, or tomorrow I'm going to be in Oxford, to make sure. And I was thinking about mentors, and I think about Rob Summer. And when I came here, Rob Summer was the guy that I looked at and said, wow, this guy is one organized manager. He was the chair of the business technology department. And I used to call him probably every other day with questions. And we would go to lunch periodically and just talk about, how do you manage these multi-campus activities and balance the time and make sure you're doing, you know, keeping all the balls in the air that you want to keep in the air. And you just made me think of him as you were talking, and I just wanted to mention that he was just a really good guy, and you know, you had to come up with some kind of strategy. Again, it's not like, hey, leave your stuff there because you're coming back to that desk tomorrow. That was not the case, and so that was an interesting challenge to, nevertheless.
I'd like to keep going with the word challenge, and also with the original vision that took 50 years to manifest. One of the challenges is to keep this campus connected to the community and to develop the community for the future. We've talked about co-ops with businesses, but I've also heard stories that we've had programs with the public schools. Do you have any stories about that?
Sure. So for years I taught a systems analysis and design course. It was one of my favorites, and this was even before we had these things labeled as experiential learning and service learning. None of those labels were there. But I found an external client, and they happened to be an elementary school teachers. And I did this because I was always looking for ways to integrate my personal life with my work life. And so when my kids were in 1st and 2nd grade, I went out and found a 1st and 2nd grade client for my students, and my students, that their teacher became their client, and so they designed software systems for that teacher. And then, you know, as my kids aged, so did my clients. Came from 1st to 2nd to 2nd to 3rd, 3rd to 4th. But it was a great experience for my students, because they were actually developing something real. It wasn't for a textbook. They were designing something real. And then they would actually, once it was all done and designed, and they would practice it and prototype it with little kids, they would go to the classrooms and work with the kids to learn these new systems. I have no idea if any of those are still out there and being used, but that'd be an interesting question.
I can remember us having technology awareness days, and we did them mainly in Middletown. I was a chair then, and we didn't do them in Hamilton, but we did them here. And I think IT would participate, business would participate, engineering technology would participate. And I can remember for multiple years we did Rube Goldberg projects. So we would put out to the community, hey, we're going to hold a Rube Goldberg contest, and your job is in at least 10 steps, turn on a transistor radio. And so the innovation of these kids, and they would come from all ages, you know, from 9th grade to 12th grade, we would have Rube Goldberg projects all around campus, and we got faculty from the campuses, and we got advisory council members and teachers from the community, and they would become judges. And we were able to get donations for, minor things as far as like gifts or whatever. I don't remember now. Maybe they were things from Miami. I don't remember. But we would rate them and rank them. And but I can remember during the time that we'd have IT competitions going on. I think business would have like accounting things going on, competitions. And the kids really loved it. It was, those were fun. I mean, boy, those are energizing days because it's hectic as heck. And you walk around the campus and these crazy things, or balls are falling and water's pouring, and next thing you know, the radio comes on. Like, wow, that's fantastic,
Those were huge.
Oh,
they took over
Yeah.
these buildings, and
They-
people from everywhere came. Nancy Tebow, that was a brainchild of Nancy Tebow.
Yeah. She was good. She was an innovator.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can think of a community outreach project that turned out to be a disaster, but it was so unique. We decided to take students from the Lebanon Correctional Institution who would come at night classes here. And that lasted about 5 years until the people skipped class and harassed the young girls here at the campus, and President Driver decided no more. We're closing down that program with Lebanon Correctional Institute. But some of my friends taught them and found some geniuses in poetry.
yeah.
We
It's
said
amazing.
we were absolutely geniuses at poetry, but overall it didn't work out. It was an attempt to reach out to the Lebanon Correctional,
Right.
which was our neighbor in a sense,
I'm still curious about other aspects of community culture. There's a story about our sports team name that I heard about, that Miami changed from one name to another. Is that true?
You're talking at the university level, not here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that did not apply here. We had our own nickname. But at the university level, there was a point where we decided that it was racist to be called the Redskins. And so there was a move to make it to another name. But it turned out to be a political correctness event among the faculty. What happened is people who spoke out in front of keeping the Redskins name were considered to be racist, and they were in the minority because Miami had a very liberal faculty, okay? But the irony of the whole thing was the head of the Miami Indians, Chief Joseph, was all in favor of it, as long as it was not derogatory toward Indians. And in return for which they sold their paraphernalia in the bookstore and did quite well. Yeah. And somebody said now we have 40 Miami Indian students who are on scholarship at Miami. So it was kind of a unique situation where they changed to Red Hawks from Redskins.
Do we have any stories about student transformations? What is it about our students that just energizes you to go in that classroom next week and do it all again?
I'm going to pick up on something that Mark said earlier that I just have always felt at the regional campuses, and that's the compassion for students in general, but specifically students that typical universities might call non-traditional, which are probably are traditional.
Yeah.
But it's the working single mom who's balancing her child care, trying to get to 2 nights a week of classes or whatever. I mean, these people work so hard and they're so committed to what it is they're wanting to accomplish that I think you feel that among faculty. And again, my experience is with the regional campuses, so I'm not discounting that at the Oxford campus or anywhere else. But it's the nature of the population we serve. And I think people who work here, get energized here, and stay, which many people stay for a very long time when they come here, and that speaks volumes in and of itself, it's because they see that and they feel that. And again, it's not to diminish the academic integrity of what's expected, but you've got people that came through a different path to get to where they are in life right now, and they are completely dedicated to making that work. They're just, it's fun to have them in the classroom. Many of them are working in our discipline, they're working in industry and they're working in the very areas that we're talking about the class, and they share experiences and examples and situations that they encounter. But I think it's reflected in the staff and the faculty to just, people go out of, they go the extra mile to just, I don't know, do a little more for the people, come in on a weekend to do a help session or whatever. I don't, things like that happen, and that's the characteristic of the people who work here.
There was another attitude, and I think it came from Oxford, that if you were teaching on the regional campus, you weren't really teaching at the Miami University.
Yeah.
And it wasn't quite as good. And that proved to be wrong,
Yeah.
because the courses were the same, the textbooks were the same, the curriculums were the same. And if you were here 2 years and had a decent academic grade, you would transfer to Oxford, and our students did very well when they transferred here to Miami, Oxford. But there was that looking down on us as being not quite Miami.
Yeah.
So I have kind of a cool story. So being the interim dean this year, I've been lucky enough to hear lots of stories. And one of the first things I did as interim dean is Miami Middletown's 50th kickoff picnic. And at that picnic, I had all these people, and it wasn't just one, it was lots of people who came up to me and said, this place transformed my life. I had no idea what I was doing when I came and took a class or two here, but it just changed the trajectory of my life and what I've done. And they would go on and on thanking me as if I was responsible for it. But I was just the figurehead. So last week, I have a call from a student that wants to see me. Well, when a student wants to see the dean, it's never a good thing, right? You're never happy. Great, so I can't wait to see you. So I'm ready for, to get, this was wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And so the student comes in, and he just graduated in December. And what he told me is, this place transformed my life. And I thought, what a cool thing. I got people 50 years ago who are saying, this place transformed my life. And this guy graduated in December, and he was telling me how he was a 2.0 student at Sinclair, and he hurt himself. So because of the work injury, he was able to come back to school. He came back to school for the sole reason to get a job, and fell in love with the place. And it changed what he was doing through a service learning project. He got connected to the employment agency, which has recently hired him. And I mean, he came volunteering. He didn't even want to get paid. He was volunteering to go recruit for us because of what it had done for him. So what we did 50 years ago is what we're doing today.
I'm gonna, if I could share a similar story. In fact, this occurred through Facebook just this past year, and it took me by complete surprise. It was really pretty emotional too. I had a gentleman who had gotten, I think, laid off from Armco. His job was being eliminated, and he's not a young man. I mean, he is relative to me, but I mean, he was probably close to 50 when he came in my office. In fact, then my office was right next door here in room 109. He was nervous as heck, and he's telling me, yeah, I don't know, and I talked through it with him, and I'll avoid names, I said, you can do this, we'll do one course at a time, we'll do one course, if they like that, we'll do 2 courses next time, and so on. Needless to say, this guy finished our associate degree, went on, finished our bachelor's degree, and just 1 year ago, he just finished a master's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Dayton. And at his graduation, or the day after, posted the nicest comment and included my name in there, which of course he and I are friends on Facebook, so it connected, and my friends and everybody said, holy crap, Rob, that's so nice. And I was really moved by it, I gotta tell you. And I mean, it's just, and his comment was just what you said. He said, I came here thinking, there's no way I can do this, but I gotta do something because I'm unemployed. I don't, and he just said that his experience here just transformed his life, and of course he's doing really, really well now. I mean, needless to say. So yeah, that was a pretty emotional thing. That when he did it, I thought, wow, that's incredible. So
So this topic is faculty fables, and I know this question is not one of the pre-listed questions. If you want to think about it or skip it, just let us know, we can stop the camera. How do you keep your colleagues floating and keep the energy going? How do you support each other so that the faculty recharge each other? Or do you have any stories about that? And we can stop the camera if you want to, or you can say, nope, we can skip this question. We've talked about transforming the students, but how do we create that culture where the faculty also buy in and we keep each other going?
You mean a specific program of some kind, or?
It can be person to person, it could be one event, it could be, and you don't have to name the faculty at this point, but is it a program, is it a conversation? Because sometimes faculty kind of burn out.
Yeah.
How do you help each other find the energy again?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I have anything specific, but in my department we have hired over the last 5 years several new faculty. In fact, we have the first endowed professorship in our department. And when I look at these young people who are coming in, I know that, and I chaired all those search committees, so I was directly involved with the calls and the interviews and the follow-ups and all of those things. And in fact, the last hire, we went out of our way to reach out to this person. But I think that sharing the kind of passion that you grow up with when you're very small as a campus or a program to where you are today, and this idea of serving students. I mean, I've used the phrase many times, and I believe it in my heart, the most important person on this campus is the student. I tell my students that, I tell my colleagues that. I felt that way as chair. There's nobody more important than a student on this campus. And that we ought to do our work every day with that in mind, that we're here just to help people get to where it is they want to get to. In other words, don't go in with the idea you have to earn a bachelor's degree or you have to earn an associate degree, because there are students coming here for all kinds of reasons. But that as long as we're compassionate to their needs and desires, their aspirations, while maintaining integrity and quality, the students will respond, they'll respect that, and they'll appreciate it. And I think that people that want to do a good job, and you look at people who enter the teaching profession, there's something about them that's what they want to do to begin with, is to just sort of help others. So again, I don't know of any particular program or anything, but I just think that those kinds of things help.
Well, there is one way that Miami keeps connected with the community, especially in Butler County. It has a learning and retirement program for people who are retired 55 and over. And it's been going maybe 15, 20 years. I've taught it in for 10 years.
Yeah.
And these people are absolutely delightful. They're mostly all Miami graduates, and they have their degree from Miami. And they come to take these courses anywhere from art to physics. I mean, it's just a broad spectrum of courses. The University of Cincinnati has one that's one of the top ones in the country, but Miami has a very good learning and retirement for senior citizens, and that keeps them still connected with Miami and maybe making donations to Miami if they could do that as well.
So I want to key off something that Rob said. And it was that there's something about going into the teaching profession. I think there's something about the people that come and work at Miami regional campuses, because these are people that are paid a little bit less than what the average is out in the field. They have a higher teaching load, and among the academic circles, being at a regional campus is less prestigious than being at a main campus. So I think the people that come here, and it's the reason I'm here, there's a commitment to the kind of students that we serve, that we talked about earlier. They're students who, to me, they're very real students. They're authentic. Most of them don't come here with a lot of money. Some do, but that's out of the norm. And so I think it's the kind of, I think most of us remain energized because we deeply believe in what we're doing. If we didn't, we wouldn't work here. I mean, I've had job offers over the years, Wright State, Miami, Oxford, but this is where I want to be. This is the idea of it being open admission. That was always very, very important to me. High quality, very, very important. Not often do you have those two things combined, open
Very true.
admission and high quality. And so I think part of the energy comes from the kind of people we attract here. They're better.
So it took 50 years for this to all come together. What are some things that seem to run right along very quickly, and was there anything that just seemed to take a very, very long time from the original vision of how MUM would serve the community?
Well, the 4-year degrees took 50 years.
Yeah.
It's kind of slow.
It took quite a while to get the 4-year degree, bachelor's degree program, yeah. Right.
You know, I mean, there might be an opportunity, again, I don't know if there's or not, but for dorms or living space that people could rent. And even though we predominantly serve the communities, I mean, there's probably opportunities, especially as we grow bachelor's and now master's degree programs, for us to be able to attract students from other communities and provide for them a place to live, be that privately owned housing facilities or perhaps university-sponsored facilities. That's still to come, if it does. I don't know. But yeah, I think the bachelor's, it's kind of interesting. Like I said, I mean, ours started, but boy, it was an anomaly. You know, it didn't was not the norm, and now here we are. And it's just an exciting time for the campuses.
It's funny when I think back. I mean, I think in some ways everything's changed, right? I started teaching in the classroom with no computers.
Mm-hmm.
And in other ways, everything's exactly the same. You know, you still have a student who
Yes.
wants to learn computing or French or engineering. So different, but still exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The original vision for this campus from the community was to allow their children to gain a liberal arts education because they had hopes for their children. Do you still sense that hope when you walk on the campus now? And how does that manifest? Community hope, and how does it manifest?
Well, I think the hope is there because of the stories that students tell and the variety of stories that you experience with students. And, you know, it's usually one-on-one advising sessions, students who, you know, just stop by and, can I talk, you know, and, you know, they start telling you stories about things that are going on in their life, a sickness, a problem with work, a problem with a divorce, you know, all of those things happen. Yet I think they see these campuses, Miami, Middletown, as a stable, and we're here, we're going to be here today, we're going to be here tomorrow, but a stable place where once they get over this hurdle that might be, you know, putting a bit of a barrier in their way right now, we're still here to help them, and that they can rely on that. And so for me, that's the hope. I mean, I think it's hope from the student's perspective that they can achieve what we're here to offer, and that can improve their lives.
Now, this is going into a database where this will be cross-referenceable and people can generate research projects out of it. Are there any topics that you think people should hone in on when looking at the history of Miami Middletown that you think should be researched later, or that people should pay attention to in the future? What do you think should be remembered and possibly researched? And again, you can always stop on the surprise.
Maybe
questions.
something to do with the success of our students, you know, in finding jobs and finding careers that they're doing well in. They got their start here. In other words, the success story of many of the students.
You know, I think sometimes the value added to the life of a student pursuing this on the Oxford campus, on the regional campuses, in some ways, is much greater than the opportunity value added at the traditional university. And again, I don't say that with diminishing the value of what goes on, but I've said it before, I'll say it here again. You know, sometimes I think about the students who are attending Oxford, it's like, just don't mess them up and they're going to do fine, because they're already at the top of their class, they're in the top 20% of their graduate, you know, and they're going to do fine. And Miami is a wonderful place for them to continue to excel. A lot of times the students who come here didn't experience that prior to coming here. And there's nothing more refreshing and rewarding than you see the person who maybe started timidly, you know, and they're questioning, and gee whiz, by 1 year, 2 years, or whatever, all of a sudden they're emerging as the leader in the class, right? Or they're on a project, team project, and they always become the you know, the team chair. And yeah, that's pretty neat to see. And I think it, again, it's a value added thing to a person's life that I think we probably have an opportunity to do, to have a bigger change, maybe.
Now, I'm thinking forward, so at the 75th anniversary of the campus, what is your message to the faculty of that year who's looking at this video?
Well, they'll see where we came from and how we got there. And I think it's important that they know that, why it was established, what was its purpose, and did it accomplish that? You know, to know the history. You've got to know your history, or you'll be doomed to repeat it, the bad parts about it. So,
What should we repeat?
I think what we've been doing successfully, you know, the concern for student is the student is the number one important thing.
You know, I think probably just, you know, thinking of things as an engineering type, I mean, I think of the impact technology has in the delivery methods. I mean, today I put all my course materials on my Canvas site from day one, when I used to walk into the class with the mimeograph sheets and hand them out. You know, they have everything. They, you know, even sample tests are out there from day one. And I think that the use of technology is going to continue to improve the method by which we deliver content, and could and will likely improve the quality. But I think ultimately it still comes back to that individual and that person and that personal inspiration, that inspiration that a teacher or an advisor can provide to a person. You know, no technology, at least that I see today, is going to take over that. And I would venture to say 25 years from now,
I don't think robots are going to replace us.
Not the personal side of things. And I think that personal touch is still going to need to be there in order for that sort of value addedness, and you know, the compassion part of it is important.
I think Rob just said it very well. What I'm thinking about is all the people that have contributed to where we are right now. We've all grown and learned from what others have given us over the years, and I hope that, you know, in another 25 years, those people will be picking up where we left off. You know, I'm not sure I articulated that really well, but that's the thought that I have.
Is there anything else that you want to make sure is included in the record for people to look at in the future, or future faculty to look at for orientation, or just what message would you like to see recorded on this film that you haven't addressed yet?
There's just so many fantastic faculty members.
Yeah.
I mean, really, really good. And I jotted down some, but then I thought, well, if I mention these, then I'm going to be leaving out others. The ones that I did jot down, there was a group of us, Jean Vanderbeek, Amy Fisher, both of those two have retired, Beth Dietz and myself. We met for years, you know, maybe once a semester for breakfast, and it was completely different disciplines. Nursing, math, psychology, computer science. And that was a really useful, each one of us were, I think, leaders in our particular areas. And that was something that might go back to your, how did you re-energize and how did you stay
Yeah.
energized? Because we did that for maybe a decade, and I wish I hadn't retired so we could keep doing it. I retired.
Any other messages to the future viewers of this film?
There's a quote that's on the outside of Voice of America that I pause and look at every time I go in that building. And it was written by one of the big donors there. And the quote is, what's the most important, I'm not getting it exactly right, what's the most important is what you leave behind. And I love stopping and pausing and reading that quote because I think we as educators, we leave a lot behind. We leave it through our students. You know, we haven't left a building or a widget or nobody's going to care about the articles I wrote, right? They're going to be, not too many people care about them now, right? Nobody's going to care about any inventions that we create, but the people who's the students whose lives we change, that's going to be the people who live here. That's our legacy.
Yeah.
Work here, not live here. Sorry, Freudian slip.